Welcome back to Nell. I'm John. In the last video, you'll remember how I constructed the Heres fencing which surrounds the lift shaft construction at Nell Station. Obviously, there's very little area to store materials on the platforms as part of the build, and therefore these have got to be stored slightly remotely. And because of their cost in the real world, there has to be some form of security for the site overall. So in this video, I'm going to look at constructing solid site security fences which are going to surround a yard area in the main car park at Nell Station. So where did I begin? The first thing was that I used good old Google and found some images of the type of fencing I wanted to create, which you can see here. Obviously, there are various types, and I wanted to select something that was as simple as I could manage with regard to cutting card on the laser cutter, and that looked good at the scale that we're working with, which is our O gauge. As you can see, this type of fencing is very similar to standard meshed Heres fencing. It has the feet supporting it at the bottom, but they do actually have, in some cases, strengthening arms or braces to the rear, inward to the site. So once I'd selected the type of fence I was going to try and recreate in OO gauge, I went onto the Lightburn software and started drawing out my plans. There were a number of changes made. One of them, I was going to have ribs on both sides and a sandwiched solid piece of card between, and then a framework to the rear, which, to be honest, was too big. And that is one of the images you see later on in the video. I then opted for a sandwich effect with two outer layers and an inner layer. One outer layer to the front of the fence being ribs, then a sandwiched center solid layer, followed by a framework which supports the whole structure. And of course, use the same feet as I had on the standard Heres fencing. Now you can see the first cuts on the laser cutter. This is the rear framework, and as you can see, I've got rivet holes all the way along, which when painted would indicate rivets holding the frame and the pressed steel fence panels together. These are the support legs being cut, but I adapted the plan to incorporate a back brace and a cross center piece for strength. And here we see the first trial cut. This is the final iteration of the plan with the solid center, the framework rear, and individual ribbed panels. And now I've moved on to the gluing together of all the various parts. In this first attempt, I used PVA, which, as you can see, is a bit messy, and it comes through the ribs or the gaps in the ribs, so you have to use a stick to clear the glue out as best as possible. So I reverted to using a glue stick, which I find is perfectly adequate for this scale and small items, and especially when you then apply layers of paint and varnish, sealer. it does the job effectively. So I have no issue with that, and it's a lot less messy. And here are the finished items. I measured the area that I needed to fence, and I made an extra piece, in fact, an extra piece and a half, because one is going to be cut in half later on in order to fit in the area that I wish to fence off as part of this site. They just now need to be sealed. And now for a quick blast of matte clear seal, followed by grey automotive acrylic primer. And the final part of the process prior to assembling everything, hand painting using an acrylic from Hobbycraft, just a standard acrylic paint, with a soft brush, brushing it into all the nooks and crannies, but not over painting, as I didn't want some of the detail, i.e. the rivet holes, to disappear. Obviously everyone can paint, so I've speeded part of the video up. And now all 6 fencing panels painted. As you can see, this is the reverse, i.e. the framework, and I'm really pleased that the rivet holes do still stand out at that scale. After leaving the panels to dry for a few hours, now comes the stage where you have to add the feet. Now, as you can see, I've used the same feet as in the Harris fencing, because in my Nelltown world, the Harris fencing and the site security fencing were all supplied by the same company, so they decided to supply concrete feet. You can, of course, if you wish to build something like this, use black rubberized feet or other colors, which some manufacturers use, and all of that can be found on images on the internet. The paint I've used is a watered down home base color called Rabbit's Whisker, which I'm going to start using on a number of the areas of concrete in different parts of the layout later on in the build. And here we see the panels with the feet attached, and as you can see from this close-up, I'm quite pleased with the effect that the blue acrylic paint has had. Remember, I used a matte spray to seal the card prior to painting, and that appears to have picked out certain bits in the card, as it's a recycled card, and then when the paint is applied, it gives a mottled effect, so a bit like weathered fencing. Now we move on to the most fiddly part of the construction, and that is adding the back bracing. As you can see, use of tweezers and what I think is a steady hand to assist, and super glue. for this part, as it gave an instant grab and bond, which is what you need with something as fine as this. And I also find the super glue, as it absorbs into the card, does strengthen the card. And so to the finished product, awaiting adding to the layout. And finally, the fencing in place surrounding the site. And as you can see, I've put in a little figure just to indicate the height of the fence. And as you can tell, by making fencing like this, you can quite easily leave off the feet and create gateways in. And you also notice a site safety sign that I've grabbed from the internet. And also you have a cheeky look at the porter cabins that I designed and built myself from scratch, along with the staircase going up to the top cabin office. That is exceptionally fragile again, and was one of the first things I tried to do on the laser cutter, and I think it turned out quite well. I also found a use for the spare Harris fencing and also the feet, as dumped, as all builders will naturally do. I hope you enjoyed that third look into Nell Town and the build itself. The next aspect that I'm going to cover will be the scenic decoration in the site. So pallets, drop sacks, and various other bits that you would find. And I will put a shout out to Goodwood Scenics. I've ordered some steel sheet, which is going to be obviously used for the cladding on the lift shaft. So that will be in situ, ready to be hoisted into place, along with some IBCs. So please like, and if you wish, subscribe, and I will endeavor to keep generating videos and hopefully become more professional in them with better soundtracks. So apologies for the gaps in audio.